Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Again, Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to stand in support of the resolution to borrow from the European Investment Bank the sum of 13.5 million euros to finance emergency operating expenses in the health sector related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, I noted this was a matter placed on the agenda for a planned meeting of Parliament on June 22nd, 2021. Mr. Speaker, this was just prior to the general elections. This meeting did not take place as the former government prioritized the general election activities in a desperate bid to win the elections. Again, they were the ones who scheduled the sittings of Parliament, but they failed to turn up in their own things that they scheduled. And so, all of those sessions were destroyed by self-combustion. I also note, Mr. Speaker, that the EIB approved this project on December 16, 2020. Mr. Speaker, I would like to hear from the Minister for Finance why this loan for emergency operating expenses was not finalized expeditiously in the light of the need to secure urgent funding for meeting COVID-19 related expenses. So you come there and ask us why a whole year. This is our first Madipwete, and it is for the people of this country. It is not for no FFF, but to address the pressing but legitimate needs of the people of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to impact the health sector in St. Lucia, and there is need to meet the operating expenses related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic is still a major issue that the world and St. Lucia continues to grapple with. In some countries, Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 is on the rise again. In fact, some countries like the United Kingdom, one of our major tourist markets, is entering a third wave. The virus continues to mutate, and the BA4 and BA5 can substantially escape the protection from vaccination. Mr. Speaker, the new subvariant's ability to evade the vaccine has resulted in many people contracting COVID-19 multiple times. Fortunately, and I repeat, fortunately, these strains are not as deadly and fewer people are dying. Mr. Speaker, people are unfortunately still dying, and we need to provide the best support to our health facilities to minimize the number of deaths. Mr. Speaker, the mutated virus still causes serious illness, with some people falling for as long as 7 to 9 days. The need for continued testing and purchasing supplies is also necessary as we continue to monitor this serious COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, it is also the case that the virus will have a disproportionate effect on the clinically vulnerable. There is now a new strain of the virus called BA2.75, which is worrying scientists as it spreads in India and has arrived in other countries, including the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, scientists say that the variant BA2.75 spreads rapidly and evades immunity from vaccines and previous infections. It is unclear at this point whether it can cause more serious disease than the other Omicron variants, including the globally prominent BA0.5. Mr. Speaker, there is therefore a pressing need for us to treat the COVID-19 pandemic seriously and to provide the funding for supplies and equipment for the health sector to provide the necessary care to our population. The project, Mr. Speaker, consists of financing investments of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, St. Lucia, aimed at implementing the measures to respond to the COVID-19 health emergency and improve the future pandemic preparedness of St. Lucia. The project focuses on financing the needs of the healthcare system, and that is in keeping with putting people first, These include supplies of consumables, equipment and reagents, setup of dedicated facilities or quarantine zones and isolation, case management, payment for support services, reconfiguration of hospital areas. Mr. Speaker, such measures are part of the overall response effort put in place by the St. Lucia government to fight and contain the COVID-19 outbreak and its medical and socio-economic consequences. Mr. Speaker, the funds will mainly cover both operational expenditures for consumables and drugs as well as capital costs related to medical equipment and health facilities setup and reconfiguration. Mr. Speaker, given the overall importance of this project in helping the government to provide the necessary support to the health sector to address the COVID-19 pandemic and to improve our response and our readiness to the pandemic in the future, I wholeheartedly support this resolution. Mr. Speaker, the loan is also provided on highly concessional terms, which include repayment over a 20-year period, with the loan repayment commencing after 4 years grace period. This loan is highly concessional and will not be detrimental to our fiscal situation. I wish to give the Minister of Finance my full support for this resolution. Again, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition should have just said that and take his seat. But he went to this fuel prices and saying that they had a worse crisis to deal with and want to put pressure on this government where fuel prices are concerned. Mr. Speaker, I wish to deal with that specific issue. And for us to look at the figures and understand the gravity of the situation. Mr. Speaker, we all know that as a small, open and vulnerable economy, we depend on international trade, which makes us extremely vulnerable. So we are dealing with those vulnerabilities. I mean, as small island developing states in the OECS, we have certain structural vulnerabilities. Small size, small GDP, small populations, our openness to international trade. That's why during COVID, we depend so heavily on tourism. When the world lost its appetite for investment and travel, we immediately suffered the consequences. We depend a lot on it. Climate change continues its decimating march across the environmental, economic, and social fabric of this country. It is causing a lot of fiscal challenges. And with other external shocks, Mr. Speaker, like the war in Ukraine, it has increased the specific gravity of our problems in St. Lucia. And therefore, it constitutes a new challenge for us. As we believe we were emerging out of the dark clouds of COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, causing high interest rates, affecting directly the economy of this country. Even during COVID, Amerijet used to operate, people used to purchase online, and those flights continue to come in and out. We had COVID, but we did not have those high interest rates. And of course, in terms of the shipment of cargo, the rates were not that high. And so it is a different scenario that we are dealing with. So I believe it is important for us to look at the figures over time. I distinctly recall at the time the Leader of the Opposition leading a strike because of what he said was the case of a missing consumption tax of over $4. And then immediately, yes, it was $2 something plus $4, a total of $680, yes. But he was looking for that additional amount, he said, that we were making. And then immediately after winning the election in 2016, saying his first job as Minister of Finance was to sign an SI for the reduction in oil prices when he indeed signed for an increase in fuel prices. He then further increased excise taxes by an additional $1.50 per gallon. The spike in oil prices today has caused inflation to increase across the world and has led to an increase in interest rates. We in St. Lucia have no control over these international economic developments. But I am extremely confident that the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party, led by the Honourable Member for Castries East, has been implementing the best economic and social policies to cushion the impact on the people and economy of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I would like to present the honourable members the trend in oil prices over the period 2012 to 2022. And the reference for this, Mr. Speaker, is https://www.macrotrends.net/1369/crude-oil-price-history-chart. That is where you can find the oil prices. This can be fact-checked and verified, Mr. Speaker. The trend of oil prices using the average closing price is as follows, and is in US dollars. In 2012, the Labour Party in office, it was $94.05. In 2013, it went up to $97.98. In 2014, it remained in the 90s, 93.17. Towards the end of the term, 2015, it dropped to 48.66. 2016, 43.29. This is what our government faced whilst we were in office. 3 consecutive years as we enter office. And the Minister of Finance at the time, the member for Beaufort South, he had to deal with GDP that was underestimated. So he had a debt to GDP ratio of 71% instead of the rebased GDP of 61%. And that affected at the time our ability to raise monies from bonds because institutional investors look at the figures, Mr. Speaker. So oil prices in excess of $90 when we're up, resulting in our government cushioning as much as possible these oil price increases and setting a target of $2.50 per gallon at the time. In most cases, we were forced to collect less than $2.50 over the period. Now let us look at the remainder of the period when UWP was in office, Mr. Speaker. 2017, remember when I started in 2012, $94.05. In 2017, $50.80. In 2018, $65.23. In 2019, the year before COVID, $56.99. 2020, $39.68. During that time, enjoying rock bottom prices for fuel. So, Mr. Speaker, what we see is that the SLP reduced the price from $3 per gallon to $2.50 per gallon. And what did the former Minister and Minister for Finance, the former Prime Minister and Minister for Finance did while he benefited from low oil prices? He increased the excise tax by $1.50 per gallon to $4 per gallon, which was supposed to have been placed in a lockbox. Mr. Speaker, I believe the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance has searched high and low and cannot find this lockbox. This exposes the hypocrisy of the former Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, who could not reduce fuel prices when oil prices were at record lows in 2020. Instead, he chose to give cushy contracts to his FFF. Where were the people of St. Lucia in your planning? Where were they? And you want to come here as if you all are champions of the ordinary people in this country? That's why they got rid of the United Workers' Party government in a very dramatic way. You all trickle-down economics, which has been a palpable failure all over the world. All over the world. Got you all into trouble. You all didn't care about the people of this country. So, Mr. Speaker, no one could have predicted the war between Russia and Ukraine. This was a major, unanticipated shock that has had severe consequences for the economy. Under such circumstances, Mr. Speaker, policymakers must invariably be dynamic and must be recalibrated to suit the particular circumstances that the country is confronted with. This is a new scenario. This is a mutation of the challenges that exist when we entered office. And we have been doing very, very, very well, touching the lives of the people of this country. The successes we enjoy today is that what makes headlines in the hearts and minds of the ordinary people in this country that were excluded from your plans during the time that you were in office. IMF, CDB, World Bank gave monies for income support of in the vicinity of 300 million. How much of that money was spent in income support? In the vicinity of 7 point something million. You ignored the people of this country. And I've been to the House and used the very estimates you gave me to pull out what you did with those monies. The magnitude of the shock of the Russia-Ukraine war is so significant that the IMF has revised the global growth forecast down from an estimated 6.1% in 2021 to 3.6% in 2022. That's true. And the source of this information is the World Economic Outlook for April 2022 by the IMF. I'm giving them the sources, and they have to revise because this thing is mutating too. That's another virus, an economic virus that has teamed up with COVID, and in the case of St. Lucia, team up with Alandemic. We now have a former failed Minister of Finance and leader of the opposition who is now advocating that our government should subsidize prices when he indicated that he could not reduce those prices during COVID when oil prices had hit rock bottom. Can you imagine that? And you come inside of there as if you're brand new. As if you were not involved at all in doing the people of this country your mission state. So you tiptoe in here. You know? And to use the words of my predecessor, Honorable Velan John, in one of his budget presentations, he said, Mr. Speaker, if a Martian had mysteriously entered this August assembly, he, the Martian, would have come to the seemingly ineluctable conclusion that this was a virginal prime minister. Entering his very first term in office, pregnant with the seeds of reorganization and bold intentions. And so, Mr. Speaker, we see the leader of the opposition. You just left office as Minister for Finance, and you come here and you're trying to put pressure on a man that is trying to clean up the mess. You try to refute information I provided from the estimates, from the social and economic review. You said that was gospel. And you had a difficult time responding. I must give you 100% for trying to respond, but 0 in terms of your response. Because every argument was destroyed by self-combustion. So, Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House, we deal with the facts and do not believe that the truth is what you believe in. Like the leader of the opposition and former Prime Minister has said on a multiplicity of occasions. We can forget the multiple versions of his famous statements, ching, ching, ching. We believe that the truth has to be empirically verified. That is validated by data and information. So, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance has attempted to cushion this huge oil price shock on our economy by collecting a minimal at the time and now rien. Because we want to manage the situation in our country. We're trying to ease the squeeze on the people of this country. And so, Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition and his party loyalists are clearly engaging in political mischief and misinformation, just as he did when he orchestrated the Orange March, in which he said there was a missing $4.80 consumption tax on fuel. Mr. Speaker, our memories are short, but the member for Mico South still believed he could fool people with the gift of the gab. Mr. Speaker, the people of St. Lucia showed him in no uncertain terms that they were not fooled by the meaningless statements and trying to mama guide them during the period leading up to election. This is a new government. We have not been there in office for 1 year. We are fast approaching 1 year. And this is a period when we are setting the foundation, we are setting our course to navigate the turbulent period. And we ask the people of St. Lucia to be patient. When the captain said, take your seat, fasten your seat belts, because we are going for a period of turbulence. But it will not be forever. We are going to effect a safe landing. So do not listen to the misinformation barons of the opposition who are trying to poison the well springs of public opinion, making you believe that we are the cause of the seeds that are in the global political environment that is causing our continued marginalization. And I ended with an aviation example, and I will end again with one. When an aircraft is on the ground, it must defy gravity to experience lift. That's 4 forces acting on it. It has the weight of the aeroplane, dealing with gravity, and then you have lift as the opposing force. Then you have the drag of the contemporary global environment, and then you have the thrust. Our policies are going to create the thrust that will cause the lift, defying the odds and defying the problems and the challenges that confront us. And I say in closing, may God continue to bless the Honorable Prime Minister, the Cabinet of Ministers. My colleagues are up to the task. And we are united behind that great general. And there's only one captain in the cockpit, and that is the Honorable Philip Joseph Pierre, the man from Machin, the man from the East. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing me leave to make this minor intervention.